All right, everybody, thanks for joining in. This is the second to our double feature of Star Wars that we're recording anyway. And
I know we're horror heads, but when it comes to Star Wars, we kind of stretch a little bit here and we expand our focus.
yeah, and I think we do a big apology too, because we spent a lot of time talking about Sylvester and Stallone movies, and then we jumped into the Star Wars hunk.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, but I think after this episode, I think we'll be full blown back to the horror stuff for a little while anyway. But,
yeah, we got some stuff coming up for you all.
But this is the last of the stuff that came out in 2019 that we saw in 2019. And even though this episode doesn't come out till mid-January-ish, we're still counting it as an episode that we saw in 2019. And so to us, it's brand spanking new. And this is going to be a first for us, this episode. I know I've said that a lot in previous episodes here lately, but we are recording this episode before the two of us have seen it together, just because of the fact that we wanted to get it recorded. So we're actually recording this a couple of days before we're planning to go see it together, and then we're going to see it together, and then I'm sure our opinions aren't going to really change. Well, at least I hope not anyway.
Right.
But we are talking about 2019's Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
Woohoo! Yeah, we finally got to see the final story in the trilogy, the Disney trilogy. I know that everybody's been pretty tough on the Disney trilogy so far, and I understand why. I mean, Star Wars, it kind of connects to everybody's childhood, and people don't want them to mess up with this. So, and anytime there's something that causes a problem, people get really emotional about it. So. Yeah, so here we go. Here we are. I can't believe it, to be honest with you, because it seems like The Force Awakens just came out yesterday. But here we are. Now we're finishing this trilogy.
It is crazy, crazy. And I have to say right out of the gate that I was dreading seeing this movie. This was one of those things that I was, and I've been somewhat vocal about this. I mean, but I was not a fan of The Last Jedi at all. I saw it 2 times opening weekend. I saw it on Thursday night, and then me and you saw it on Sunday.
We did.
Before we recorded, I think we no, we didn't record it. Or did we see? No, we saw it on Saturday night.
Did we?
I think so, because, yeah, we went and have burgers afterwards.
Oh, that's right. It was Saturday night. Yeah, you're right.
But anyway, yeah, so I saw it twice in the one weekend. I technically still haven't seen the whole thing since. We have Disney Plus, and my wife did watch it leading up to this new movie coming out. But I tried to sit through it that time, and I was like, oh God, this is stupid. I mean, there's some parts of it that are good, but there's other parts that, like the casino thing, I'm like, what the hell is this? Oh God, it's just bad. So I was very, I was very adamantly against The Last Jedi. And so even when the previews came out for this, I was kind of like, it looks okay, but I don't know. And then we went on the Thursday night before it opened, and I still was that way. Even when the opening crawl started, I was kind of like, okay, here we go. I'm going to be here for 2.5 hours, I guess. Let's hope it's bearable. And then, it probably took a good 15, 20 minutes before I was like, okay. And then I got to tell you, man, probably within the first half hour or so, I was like, all right, this is okay. And I think I cried 2 or 3 times during that movie. And I walked out of that theater like, that is the best damn Star Wars movie I've seen since The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I actually thought it was a very good movie too. I've actually seen it 3 times now. I'm on
Whoa.
3. Yeah, I saw it first time with my boys. Second time I took a date out to see it, and then third time I saw it with my folks and my youngest son. And so now, I'm going into number 4 with you on Sunday.
Wow, cool. Yeah, it only number 3 for me. So,
and I really enjoyed it. I was a huge fan of the Force Awakens. I remember seeing that one several times in the theater too, and I love that movie. It's my favorite. It really to me was like just I thought J.J. Abrams really brought the Star Wars story back big time with that film, and I liked it. I still like it better than Rogue One. I know it seems like everybody loves Rogue One more, but just to give you a heads up with The Last Jedi, the first time I saw it in the theater, I was like, huh? I was kind of confused, and I saw it again in the theater. I only saw it twice in the theater, and the second time I was sort of, huh? And then bought the Blu-ray, watched it a few more times, and I'll be honest with you, it has grown on me. I do appreciate it for what it is. I understand there's a lot of backlash for it, but I don't have it's quite the issue that a lot of people do with that one. But I will say that the Rise of Skywalker to me was a great third act, and I really, really enjoyed this film.
Yeah, it's what's weird. We kind of talked about this a little bit when we talked about It Chapter 2, where to me personally, It Chapter 2 almost made It Chapter 1 almost irrelevant. I would almost rather see them cut together. Which is weird because now that It Chapter 2 is out on DVD and Blu-ray and stuff, I guess It Chapter 2 is didn't do as well as we initially thought it did. There's a lot of people that don't like that movie.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I love Force Awakens. I hated The Last Jedi. And then I loved The Rise of Skywalker. And
good.
To me, it almost, and this is just personal feelings, but to me, I really almost don't see this as a trilogy. I just almost see this as a 2-movie trilogy, really, I guess. But I don't really count The Rise of or The Last Jedi in that mix. And part of that, too, is because, there was a lot of fan backlash for The Last Jedi. And a lot of the stuff, to me personally, and I think it was done intentionally as well, but J.J. Abrams kind of came back in, took the reins back, and kind of sort of undid a lot of what The Last Jedi did, or kind of corrected at least some of the mistakes of The Last Jedi. There was a few other things too that he did to where I know that there's a lot of people bitching about some of the stuff, for example, to jump towards the end of the movie, but Chewie finally gets his medal, which, to me, I was like, oh, that's cool. I wasn't like, yeah, he finally got it. And I know there's a lot of people that are like, oh, just leave the originals alone. I do have to admit that when Disney first got control of Star Wars and The Force Awakens was originally announced, and J.J. Abrams was attached to it, I was like, that guy, come on. He already did Star Trek and stuff. He doesn't need to do Star Wars. But, man, I really, really wish that J.J. Abrams would have done all 3 of these movies.
Yeah, I can kind of see what you're saying with that. Because, and that's the thing that I know a lot of fans are talking about is how this third movie does seem like it's sort of like he really tries to kind of almost build a second movie in the trilogy and squeeze it in real quick and then finish it up. Because The Last Jedi, a lot of people were really upset with Rian Johnson's approach with that. And I understand that completely because there's a lot of things in that film that killing Snoke and Skywalker's death and the background with Rey and all that a lot of people were pretty upset with. But to be honest with you, I do think that, and this is probably when you look at this whole trilogy, looking back now, it would have been a much better idea had they have said, okay, we need to come up with a whole storyline and we'll go from there. Let's not just finish one movie and then come up with something for the second and then come up with something with the third. We need a whole idea of how this is all going to play out. And they didn't have that. And you can tell that pretty instantly. And I think that's what kind of bit them in the ass at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I was talking about in the Mandalorian episode and it's not just me, and like you had mentioned too, you've heard about it elsewhere, that hopefully that they are starting to look at this as a big picture rather than one movie at a time, especially if they are going to be doing, not only they're going to continue to do trilogies, which is fine, but with the Star Wars universe, it's so huge. And if you're going to do what Disney has already proven that they're going to do, is you're going to have a trilogy that is ongoing, but then you're going to do standalone films, and you're going to do a TV series as well that are at different time points within existing established storylines within that Star Wars world. You really, really, really have to think things through. And I think they kind of hopefully have that figured out at this point. Because, yeah, like you had said, it really does not feel like, it just kind of feels like they said, oh, let's get a Star Wars movie out as fast as we can, and then we'll figure it out as we go along. And then episode 8 came out, and it kind of went in a different direction, and then everybody went, oh, God, no. And so they went, oh, shit, well, we'll fix that and we'll get it back over here. But the thing that they smartly did with this, I mean, granted, everybody didn't get a benefit from this, but there was some stuff that they introduced in The Mandalorian, the TV show, that then was used in The Rise of Skywalker as well. So, you know, if you were watching The Mandalorian and then you saw the movie, you know, you weren't completely like, what the hell is that? You know, you were like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember that from that. So that's kind of cool. But along those same lines, you know, if they are going to be bouncing it around, they have to make sure that they're not creating plot holes, or they're not doing stuff to where they have to come back, which they ended up doing in The Rise of Skywalker. You know, like, oh, we got to fix it, like a bunch of shit.
Right, exactly. And one of the things, too, with this film, you know, I will admit that, like, the first, what would you say, like the first half hour, 40 minutes is so fast. And I know a lot of people mention this. It's like, you're just like, whoa, we're here, and we're this planet, we're that planet. We're all of a sudden we're doing this now, and oh, this is happening. And you kind of like, I kind of accept it as it is what it is, and there's just a lot being pushed in that beginning of the film. But like you said, like once you get to a certain point, then all of a sudden it really becomes an emotional experience. Like, you know, you start to really feel what's going on with these characters. But it did seem like it was kind of like a crash course in the beginning. It
did. It really did. It felt like how you had kind of explained earlier, like it almost felt like they were doing like a 30-minute, 45-minute, like, here's a recap of what would have happened in J.J. Abrams' episode 8. And then here we go. Now we're in episode 9.
Right.
That's kind of a thing.
Right.
Because, you know, there was a lot of stuff that, I mean, one of the biggest things to me that they finally went through and they like, oh, you know what? We got to explain this Leia story. So, yeah, Leia was a Jedi, or she was going to become a Jedi, and not just like all of a sudden have her force fly through the fucking space. You know, and then,
right.
You know, they all but cut Rose out of this story because, I mean, I know Rose was, and there's nothing wrong with the actress that plays Rose. That's not the stance that we are taking on this show. She is great, but the character of Rose was so unnecessary to the story of The Last Jedi. That whole side story did not need to be told.
Oh, yeah. I actually heard I don't know where I heard. I think I was reading something about Star Wars, and they said that originally the script for Last Jedi, it was going to be Finn and Poe were going to go on an adventure together, and so Rose wasn't even part of it. But then they decided to split the two of them up and kind of put Poe on his own adventure on the main ship with Leia and all of that, and then have Finn go out on this whole casino thing. And yeah, the whole casino, the whole, you know, again, going back to Last Jedi, it's like every time I watch that film, I always fast forward anything with Finn and Rose, anything with the casino, and the whole like like the racing monsters or whatever they were, those creatures that that they were racing on, the DJ stuff, where what's his name, Antonio? No, not Antonio.
Yeah,
Oh,
I know who you're talking about. Yep.
That one guy who played DJ with the stutter in The Last Jedi, which obviously wasn't important enough to continue on to the next story. But so yeah, it was like these characters just did not work. You know, this whole thing that was a bad idea because again, going back to The Last Jedi, everything with Kylo and Rey and even Luke Skywalker, to me, like I was fine with the old curmudgeon-y, you know, grumpy old man type thing. I was fine with that. I know a lot of people hated that, but that was fine. I loved that whole storyline and everything connected with that. But it was just the whole the Finn and Rose subplot that was terrible. And again, the other thing too, one of the big scenes in towards the end of The Last Jedi when Finn is going to sacrifice himself for the Resistance, and he's like, you know, at the end at the Battle of Crate. And then Rose comes in and saves the day and like pushes his ship out of the way, and then like they have that little moment together. It was just one of those very unnecessary scenes that just didn't work, and I think that a lot of that stuff really kind of ended up creating why that nobody wanted to see her again in the next one. And in a sense, Rose became sort of the Jar Jar of this whole trilogy because like,
he really did, yeah.
If you look at like Phantom Menace, like there's nothing but Jar Jar throughout that whole movie, and then Attack of the Clones comes, and he's like in 2 scenes.
Yeah. And again, it's nothing against the actress that plays Rose.
No, not at all.
Yeah, because I know there's a lot of hate for that particular act, and that's how we're saying,
why?
oh, we're just.
Why would there be hate for it? Because she was fine.
Oh yeah, I don't know. There just is, and so yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that we're not hating on her. We're just hating on the character. Yeah, it's not her. It's Rian Johnson.
Yeah, it was completely unnecessary.
It was. So let's talk about Finn for a minute, though, because there was one thing that, and it's not a gripe really, but there was kind of there was a thing with Finn throughout the Rise of Skywalker that kind of sort of you had to figure it out on your own, I guess. I don't know if it was left out intentionally or not, but you had, Finn and Rose. You had Finn and Poe and Rey. They were all sinking in the sand, and Finn's like, "There's something I never told you," and then that was kind of a running theme throughout the movie.
Yeah.
My personal interpretation of the thing that Finn never told Rey was that he was Force sensitive, or however you want to say it. What's your thoughts on that?
Exact same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, that he had a connection to the Force, and and after that point, they kind of give you like a reveal that that's sort of what it is, because he's talking about how he can feel this and he can feel that, and it seemed like it was that was what he was talking about, was that he had some sort of connection to the Force.
Okay, yeah, I mean that's what I thought it was too. So that was just one of those things that I don't know if there's a deleted scene that's out there where he finally tells Poe like whatever, like, "Oh, I can feel the Force," kind of a thing that we'll get on the Blu-ray once it finally comes out. But that was like the only like kind of like unanswered thing from this movie, at least for me anyway.
Yeah, no, the one thing that to me though, and here's where this is one thing I wanted to talk to you about too, was the probably the biggest controversy in this film is the return of Emperor Palpatine. Because, okay, so, you go back to Return of the Jedi, Darth Vader picks him up, throws him down the chute. Shortly thereafter, the Death Star blows up, and boom, he's gone. I don't like it when they bring back characters that clearly are dead. And I'll be honest with you, and another thing with the Solo movie, one of the worst things I thought they did was they kind of implicate that Darth Maul somehow is still alive, like he's got robotic legs or whatever. And I'm sorry, but like when you do that, when you take a character who clearly has been killed off, and then you say like, "Oh no, he survived that," it really cheapens the movie. I mean, because you can do that the only time you can do that, in my opinion, is when you're doing a Friday the 13th film. You can bring Jason back as many times as you want. You can blow him up. You could, stick a machete in his head, whatever. Jason is immune to that, and I get that. But when you do that in something a little bit more serious, like the Star Wars films, then you're kind of crossing a line here. Because, like, let's be honest with you. You watch The Return of the Jedi. There's no way that the Emperor survived that. And I've heard some different rumors, and maybe he did this, maybe he did that. But none of them make sense to me. None of them are good. But I will say that one of the best things I heard so far, and I want to toss this at you, see what you think about this. Probably the best theory, and I don't know if it's the intention of J.J. Abrams, but is that okay? Now you go back to this film, and let me ask you this: what was the one thing about the Emperor's appearance that you noticed that kind of really stood out?
Well, there was two things, really. So one, he was kind of like zombie-like.
Yeah.
But then he was also attached to this giant mechanical apparatus that was, and I don't know if it was him that was controlling it or if it was something else that was controlling it.
That big, crane arm.
Yeah.
That was awesome. But there's another thing. Can you think of it real quickly that really sticks out about his physical appearance? And then I'll throw in my 2 cents real quickly here if you figure it out. But
he didn't have legs. I don't know.
No, he did have legs. Remember, because he
once he sucked the life force out of Ben and Ray. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know where you're going. As soon as you say it, though, I'm going to be like, oh, damn it. Yeah, of course.
Emperor Palpatine, going back to Revenge of the Sith, and then everything after, obviously, Return of the Jedi, was completely scarred. His face was scarred up with, from, when Mace Windu, did that thing to him when, with the Force lightning was coming out of his fingers and he was pushing it back and it was, going back onto his face. So if you look at the Emperor, Darth Sidious in Revenge of the Sith and in Return of the Jedi, he's got all these physical scars on his face, whereas this Emperor, that when you see, he just looks like an old man. I mean, his eyes are weird, but his face, there's no physical scarring. Did you notice that?
Oh yeah.
And I thought this was a really good theory. This is probably the only one that really kind of stuck with me, was that Palpatine has always been on this planet. I forget what it's called, Exegil or whatever it's called. And we've never actually seen him in any of the previous movies. So the Palpatine we see in Phantom Menace on up through Return of the Jedi was actually a clone. So the one that gets thrown down the chute by Darth Vader was actually not the one that's calling all the shots, because that one was the scarred one. That was the one that got all scarred up and everything. Whereas the real Palpatine was always on this planet the entire time, just pulling the strings, which I thought was a really cool theory, because that makes sense why he wasn't scarred. He didn't have any scars on his face. He had nothing. He just looked like an old man.
Okay, so that's the opposite of where I was going. I was going to say that they recovered something from the wreckage of the Death Star on the moon of Endor, and were able to clone something out of him, but it was so damaged they weren't able to get it perfect, kind of a thing. Okay. But I kind of like that too. But again, that goes back to what we were saying before, where Palpatine should have been introduced in the last movie, so they didn't have to, just this movie starts and there's oh, yep, here's Palpatine.
Absolutely.
But you have to kind of, again, because of the way that this was, I mean, at least with me, I was okay with it, but I was okay with it with that, because I knew that Rian Johnson had completely screwed over The Last Jedi. So then when this came out, I was like, okay, so yeah, J.J. Abrams wanted this story to go to Palpatine. So, yep, there he is. That's Palpatine. All right, cool.
No, I totally agree with you. I think what they needed to do with this film is they should have sat down before The Force Awakens and came up with the concept that we're going to bring Palpatine back and slowly kind of give you the idea that that's where this is going. From even The Force Awakens, there should have been a hint of it. Last Jedi, it should have been even more prevalent. Yeah. Obviously, you start the film out with Kylo going, and meeting him. It's like, yeah, we should have known that this was coming, because it seemed like, oh, let's throw this in right at the last minute. It should have been like, because I love the idea of Rey being his granddaughter. I think that's great, because you make her like this connected to the most evil character in the film, and then like Leia seeing that she had this heart, and that's why she trained her. She knew her bloodline was connected to the Sith, but at the same time she knew that Rey was like this, had the spirit of the Jedi, that she would go ahead and train her anyway. I mean, that's great stuff. That's great storytelling right there. It just needed to be drawn out a little bit more and planned out a little bit more.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because that was the only thing when I first saw this movie, when they had said, like, oh, you're the granddaughter of Palpatine. I was like, oh, fuck off. And then after a while, though, I was like, you know what, though? I'm actually okay with it. All right, we can go with this. That's cool. The only thing with that, again, is that, again, it goes back to this whole Disney planning thing, and you go all the way back, unfortunately, all the way back to Episode 1, where they're talking about Anakin's going to bring balance to the Force, and then you end up having Rey is the one who I assume is the one who ultimately bring balance to the Force. Of course, I don't know if that's true or not, but so that's my only, like, not real complaint or anything, but it's just, you have to be careful when you have all of these different movies and you have 3 trilogies in the same storyline.
Right.
Are you creating plot holes of your own?
Oh yeah, and that's kind of what happens. I mean, I guess that's part of it. There are going to be some issues. But if you look back at the original trilogy, Anakin did fulfill his prophecy. He did create balance to the Force. Because after the end of that, basically what he did ended the Empire. But that doesn't mean that that there's never going to be a battle again or a war again. It's a different generation. So I kind of accepted that part for what it was. I kind of thought of it like as, like you think of like World War II ends, but that doesn't mean that we didn't have Vietnam. That didn't mean we didn't have other.
Yeah, that's true.
So kind of just continued on. Another thing I do want to say, I want to toss this out with Rise of Skywalker, is one of my favorite scenes in this film. Now, again, I'm a huge Kylo Ren fan, so like anything Kylo Ren in all 3 of these movies, I loved. I thought to me, he's my favorite character of the new trilogy, followed by Rey. I think she's the second. In my opinion, I think Kylo was a great character. Loved it. Loved how he was, who he was, and his internal battles throughout the film. But I want to go back to one of my favorite things about this movie, and I just was like, it was one of those, like, I turned into a 5-year-old kid again, was the Luke Skywalker Force Ghost rising the X-Wing out of the water, just like, like what he could not do in Empire Strikes Back when he was being trained by Yoda. Here he is as the Ghost being able to do it. It was like kind of like a full circle experience for me. I was like, wow, that's amazing. I just remember thinking to myself, that was one of my favorite scenes of the whole film.
What's funny about that is me and you had talked about George Lucas's original concept for a sequel trilogy before he sold the rights to Disney, and I just happened to stumble upon a YouTube video about that exact topic earlier today, actually.
Oh, okay.
And there was a part of that where there was one guy that was writing writing the screenplay for the first episode in said trilogy, and one of the problems that he kept running up against was every time that Luke Skywalker was introduced into the story, then the entire story ended up being only about Luke Skywalker. So that was a thing that he always struggled with, was like,
yeah,
how do I get past having Luke Skywalker in this story
Right.
and then not having the entire story just end up revolving around Luke Skywalker.
Sure.
And that was one of the things that I was afraid of in this movie when that exact scene happened, was like, okay, so now are we going to have Luke Skywalker for the rest of the movie? And luckily we didn't, or not luckily, or however you want to phrase it, but I think that J.J. Abrams handled it very well. And it was kind of weird. I was anticipating seeing Luke again in this movie, but once we got going into the movie and I realized that Abrams was kind of correcting or erasing a lot of the stuff that The Last Jedi had done, I still was anticipating Luke making an appearance at some point in the movie. And so I was thinking to myself, I was like, so are we going to get The Last Jedi Luke? Or are we going to get a different Luke? And so I was actually kind of a little surprised that we got a little bit of The Last Jedi Luke in this movie.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, it was kind of that same character that, and he kind of basically said, like, I was wrong about how I was in The Last Jedi, and I, going off and hiding on the island and all of that. And,
yeah.
And it was cool. It was a good way of, like, really, I think JJ did a really, really good job of kind of wrapping up the franchise. I mean, he pulled things from the prequels, from the original trilogy, from the previous two films, and just put it all together best he could, I think. And I got to give him kudos for that. I think he did a great job.
So before we wrap this up, I think we have to talk about one thing. And this isn't something that we have talked about. I don't know if we've ever talked about this ever. And that is the end of this movie. Spoiler alert, if you made it this far, we're about to wreck the end of the movie. But at the very end of the movie, you had, well, not at the very end, but close to the end, you had Kylo and, well, I should say Ben and Rey end up having a big old smooch. So in your mind, was that something you anticipated and hoped for? Or were you one of the folks that were like, oh my God, they're somehow related? That's incest.
I thought it was a good wrap up because, it was sort of that thing where, Kylo, he had been turned to the dark side, and his bloodline was he was part Skywalker and, Darth Vader's grandson. And, had this experience where he realized that he got tempted and seduced into the dark path, and which ended up leading to him killing Han Solo, his father. And Rey, she had her own path, and she was a Palpatine, and the two of them, there was always this sort of connection there, and the Force brought them together, and there was this sort of underhanded romance throughout the whole thing, and I was fine with it. And I think it ended well. Kylo was sort of the bad guy all along, and he kind of got his due. Basically, he ended up giving his life force over to Rey. So I had no issue with it. I didn't see it as like an incest thing because I never thought of them as like related.
Yeah, I have to admit that I was one of these folks that always wanted those two. Ever since The Force Awakens came out, I was like, oh, those two got to get together.
Really?
Yeah. I really was. And the other thing that I had always been for was I wanted one of them to turn, but I didn't care which one.
I see.
So if The Rise of Skywalker would have ended with Rey turning to the dark side, I would have been okay with it.
Okay.
And I mean, I was actually, the way that this ended, I thought was perfect. Her declaring herself a Skywalker at the end of the movie, I thought was great. But again, if she would have flipped to the other side, I would have been okay with that as well.
Yeah, I think it would have been definitely interesting to see what would happen. But I like how they did it. I like how they wrapped it up. I wouldn't have. I don't think I would have wanted to see her go full on dark side just because she was sort of like the Luke Skywalker of this one.
Well, and the other thing with that, because I don't know if any of those characters would be willing to come back for another 3 movies. So if she would have flipped to the dark side at the end of this one, I mean, you'd have been setting it up for another 3 movies. So,
right.
But whatever. So what do you give Rise of Skywalker?
I'm gonna give it a thumbs up. I really enjoyed it. I walked out. I walked out of The Force Awakens loving it. I saw it multiple times, loved it. Last Jedi, I saw it twice in the theater, and it really, I agree, it kind of disappointed me. I was sort of like kind of walked out like, I'm not sure about this one. But then Rise of Skywalker, I walked out the first time loving it. So I got to give it a thumbs up, and I've seen it 3 times so far, and I know we're going on the 4th, where you and I are going to finally see it this weekend. And yeah, great film.
I think this is going to be my first ever. I'm doing a double thumbs up.
Woohoo!
Nice. I loved it. I went into it thinking I was going to hate it. And
yeah, you went in pretty negative, I remember.
Oh, man. And I got to tell you, and I said it at the beginning of the episode, and I'm going to say it again, this is my second favorite Star Wars movie.
I like it. Pretty cool.
Well, that's the end of the episode, but I wanted to jump in here at the end real quick and announce a special giveaway that we're going to do for this being our umpteenth non-horror episode of the 2019-2020 winter season. But seeing as how we just wrapped up our Rise of Skywalker episode, I thought what more fitting thing to do for a giveaway than give away a Rey Pop figure. So it's a Rey Pop bobblehead from Funko, new in the box. And it's going to be pretty easy. All you need to do is go to facebook.com/horrorheadspodcast. If you don't like our Facebook page already, go ahead and give it a like while you're there, but shoot us a message on our Facebook page and just tell us what your favorite Star Wars movie is. And if you liked The Rise of Skywalker or not. That's it. So go to facebook.com/horrorheadspodcast. Shoot us a message after you give us a like if you don't like us already. Tell us what your favorite Star Wars movie is. Talk to you guys next week.